All right, welcome everybody. This is the Konflux Community Architecture Call. Today is October 15th. We've got 2 points on the agenda. And Brian, I think you're up first.
Yes. So we announced last week, we sent out a survey, a vote for trying to figure out what we wanted to do with workspaces. There are 2 competing ADRs upstream. If you didn't participate or have any idea what I'm talking about, you can go read the 2 open ADRs. Just look a few weeks back in the architecture call notes. And as we said in that, we closed the vote at 9 p.m. Eastern time last night. And I have the results, and I'm going to put them here. There we go. Well, that's what we got. So the vote was clearly in favor of deprecating workspaces and simplifying down to just using Kubernetes namespaces instead of workspaces. I would say we need a plan for this. This is not a free lunch. There are still things that have to be configured in those namespaces, service accounts and secrets and quotas, permissions, role bindings. So before we can actually make some, significant change, there will have to be a plan for how those get dealt with. So we will be working on that starting now, I guess, and I'm sure there will be this. I'm sure this will probably generate even more ADRs. So stay tuned on that. But that's the results of the vote. If there's any questions, I can take them. Cool.
Well, I guess, Brian, I have one question. Will the survey results be opened up in a way that everybody can read? Do we have a place for people to put notes that we can review so we can learn any context or subtleties from the results?
Sure. There was a free field text, so I could paste these somewhere or open up the results. Yeah, they are anonymous, and if you just want to read the reasons people typed in, we have those.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I see David's hand. David. David, you're on mute. I think we can't hear you if you're speaking. No,
Still, we can't hear you, man. You can come back later.
Okay. Okay, in that case, I guess we'll cycle off this point in the agenda. We can come back to it if we have time at the end. Before doing that, on to Louis' point, any other comments or questions on the survey response, the vote response? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Brian, for organizing that. Yep. You're up next on a better mechanism for keeping up with Go versions.
Yeah, so I think this is a topic that's probably familiar to most Konflux contributors here. So I just wanted to start the conversation on how to handle these things. So last week, we ended up in a situation in EC where we had to fix a CVE, and to fix a CVE, we had to pull in a new version of a dependency, and that dependency required a certain version of Go that we didn't have a builder image for. And the builder image, usually there are 2 of them that we use, depending on what's available. There's the one from the Brew registry, and that's the one used by the OpenShift team. And that one had a version that was too old. The patch segment of the version was too old. And then there's a rel one that is provided, and that one is the minor version is too old. So neither one of those is possible. And we were kind of stuck because we didn't know how to proceed. So thankfully, I reached out to the OpenShift team, and it turns out they also had to update their golang builder image to fix another CVE that they were dealing with. So we were lucky enough that within like a day they had a version of Go builder that we could use. But this seems to be a pattern that keeps repeating itself. And now there's a version of Go 123, and we don't have any builders for that. So it kind of like prevents us from going forward. So I don't know what's the best way to do this. Maybe there's we need to have a closer relationship with the OpenShift folks, or maybe we need to maintain our own builder image. So looking for ideas to see what's a better way to do this. Andrew?
For this, you're specifically talking about maintaining our own Go builder images.
That's one of the suggestions that I think we should consider.
We have started creating some builder images for various things. Like we build our own builder image. Brian has started creating some Bazel images to use as builders. I think Gal started to create a builder image to use for OLM. Part of the challenge with that is that I think that in order to create these builder images, we should make sure that they meet the policies that any users might want to leverage. So it should adhere to the strictest policies that we have. That means that we would also be on the hook for mitigating CVEs on those. So like one of the challenges that I had when trying to update the OLM builder is we're including Operator SDK because that's a tool that a lot of teams want to use, but it has a high vulnerability. But upstream, it's effectively deprecated. So managing some of these and like it becomes a challenge. And additionally for Go, if there's anybody who wants to have any kind of ZIPS enablement that they want to use, they might have their own Go builder images. If we're doing this work, then that might be a request that comes down the line. So I think that would be, it might be more of a request than the community would want to pick up. But if somebody else wants to maintain these builder images for some subset of users, that's certainly not infeasible if they want to make that decision.
Okay. Ralph?
I just wanted to echo that I have I've seen the use case come up, the ORAS image that we use. They moved upstream to go 1.23 and the builds have just been broken, waiting for a 1.23 Go builder image to become available. So I see the use case there and in other places too, especially where we don't control our upstream directly and can't time when we want to move to 1.23 based on when our builders shift or move. I like everything Andrew said in terms of considerations about this. Maybe if we're to make a Go builder image for ourselves, we should need to name it in some way that indicates that it's private, that it's suitable only for use of our own teams and not other teams, to constrain what kind of dependencies we get ourselves into.
Andrew?
Just to reference what Ralph was saying for Oris, for the builder image, I had to use a newer version of Go, and I switched over to using Fedora for that, so I could have this newer version. I was already using the Fedora parent images, so that I can have the latest version of Unshare as well. So for that, it didn't seem like it was much of an issue, but that decision for Builda is not going to be the same decision that anybody else would be able to also make.
Brian?
I think there's a lot of value in us providing secure builder images upstream. So I guess I can speak for Red Hat that we don't have a Bazel builder image, and I don't think we're going to produce one as a product, but yet we need to have intermediate builder images in order to build some things like Google ML projects and things like that. So I want a place where I can get those images that meet high quality standards and that are going to be maintained and patched, things like that. So that's why I started trying to build that set of images. I think it would provide a lot of value to have these images, and I think it's actually a really good practice or like test case for our system, because Konflux should allow us to maintain a whole set of base images easily and help keep them up to date with MintMaker and Renovate. We should be able to essentially turn it into a 99% automated machine where we just look for pull request failures from Renovate and then triage them. And we shouldn't have that many pull request failures, right? And if we're not able to do it, no one's going to be able to do it. So I support the idea of like expanding our catalog of base images, not needlessly, but to fill gaps in the upstream where such a thing doesn't exist. I couldn't find such a thing for the Bazel images that I was happy with. Sounds like you have one for Go. So, why not try to fill that void?
Yeah, I think the major concern with maintaining that is the cost of maintenance going forward. And I understand that we can probably automate a lot of this. But it does seem like there's other things like, I don't know if you guys have heard of this Wolfie project, but they are, open source community, and they maintain like different images and stuff. But I think it's mostly base images, not necessarily, a builder image. But it might be something that it might be an opportunity for us to work with, existing communities to do something like that. But it will probably be harder to, get them to build those things in Konflux, which is I think is something that we want to be done.
I don't know. We can always talk to them. Those are, as Vincent's saying in chat, those images are built by ChainGuard, and ChainGuard, loves Tecton. So
yeah. So is trying to figure out what the takeaway is here. Is this something that, there's definitely going to be challenges if we try to do a builder images, but I feel like, is this something we should try to do as an experimentation, and then, maybe one of us adopts it and then see how it goes? Is that a good outcome for this discussion?
I think so. Plus one to that from me. I was worried, I think, like you were, about the maintenance cost going in. Brian's argument that if we can't make this 99.9% automated for ourselves, then no one can do that with our system. And that's a thing we definitely want to be true of our system. So let's use it to try and figure out how to make that as streamlined and as touchless as possible.
So I at least alluded to concerns with enabling any kind of Konflux user to be able to use these base images. Think that we can mitigate the risk if we want to selectively say that maybe for our own builder images that we use, we can leverage this Golang builder, like enterprise contract can use this Golang builder if they want, and we can mitigate the risk using policies. So in discussions we have around, should we have carte blanche approval for these builder images to be used by any kind of users? I think that in policy definition, we should say the approved image is not some complex CI builder image, but this specific complex CI builder image, so that we can have selective approval based on how these builder images are leveraged, and we can make those decisions on a very narrowly scoped basis.
Mm-hmm. Ryan?
There's a like a related thing here that I just want to mention. We can table for another discussion, but there's varying degrees of quality and build methods for the images in Konflux CI Quay repository right now, and we could enumerate like trusted images, I guess, in the enterprise contract policies based on which ones are built, the way we want them to be built, and which ones are not. Some of them are released by release service and have enterprise contract, as a definitive gating measure. Some of them are not. I don't know if they all use consistent policies, but I think it would be nice if we would maybe think about separating it out so that you could visually see which ones are built to a particular like builder image supply chain standard, and document what that standard is. Because right now when I look at the org, it's just flat and I can't tell what's what. Right?
Would introducing a new org in Quay be a good way to address this?
Could be. You can also nest repos in Quay now. It's not something I think that's supported from the UI, but if you just push them there, they land.
Yeah, for me, communicating the trustability of an artifact based on its repository location or name is a thing that we're trying to deal with enterprise contract. It's like a VSA or something on the artifacts attestation would be better to be able to determine which bar these images have held themselves to.
Yeah, I hear you. I agree with you. I'm not saying that we should just blindly trust it because it's in a different repo, but it is hard for me to go and figure out right now which ones are ones that I should use, or which ones need improvement. I guess that's what I'm saying. You know what I mean?
I think we're probably encroaching a different topic, which is and SigStore is very adamant about you don't necessarily need to trust where the channel in which you're getting something, as long as you can verify that whatever you got, you can verify that artifact on its own. So I think in an ideal world, we would verify signatures and attestations on base images instead of where they came from. But I don't think we're there yet. I think that will be quite a bit of effort to get to that place.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone for the discussion. I think there's some exploration that needs to happen here. I'll try to get that going. And any final comments before we move on to the next topic?
If you're going to be involved in creating this image or this repository as part of discovery, there is a tenant that we have that we can add this repository to, onboard it to for these builder images.
Okay. Thank you.
And see, I was on mute. Greg, I think you're up next with the next and the last topic on ADR to emit events.
Yep. I just wanted to bring it up for discussion that I made a proposal in the ADR that Konflux should emit cloud events for pretty much everything that it's doing. It doesn't have to use them, but it should admit them so that they can be utilized by users of the system. So that's really all the proposal is about.
And you're just looking for feedback, right?
Well, yeah, I think it should be done. So yeah, I'm looking for either approval and then figure out how it gets implemented or not.
Cool.
Can we talk about scope? So I think implied in it are controllers like integration service and release service that they would emit events when they do their job. What about Tecton itself? Is there a specific kind of event you want to see from Tecton that
they already do it? You can just turn them on. I don't think it's configured on in Konflux right now.
Great.
But yeah, those should be on.
You add that to the ADR, that we turn it on for Tecton.
Yeah, it might be in there. I don't remember if it's in there or not. But.
Cool. And then does this imply? Oh, Louis, go ahead. I'll raise my hand.
No, and apologies, I think I missed some of this. So are you saying that Tecton can be configured to use the cloud events instead of watchers? Is it?
Tecton can be configured to emit cloud events for significant things that happen with pipelines and pipeline runs.
Okay. Okay,
So,
cool. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think it's watcher. It has anything to do with watchers.
Gotcha.
And so I think my next question is about implied infrastructure that has to be there also. If, say, we enable this for Tecton in the upstream installer, then do we need to additionally install anything to sync those events?
Yeah, I think you'll need Knative eventing and a sync to receive the events and allow people to subscribe and actually use them. Vincent probably would know better than me, but I think that's the case.
Does the ADR recommend that we should optionally emit cloud events like Tecton does, so that you could still install it without the eventing framework and sync and just have it turned off everywhere? Or
It doesn't mention that. I think it should be on all the time, but we can, I can add that if you want the option to turn it on or off. Yeah.
I don't really have an opinion either way. I just wondered.
Cool. I guess one constraint, then there's a constraint we want to have an eye on, which is not bloating the upstream installer's default installation. We should look at how expensive it would be to add a sync there. I guess I'd like the idea of if we were to make this a requirement for all the controllers to optionally expose events, and then so somebody could turn it on.
Yeah, I mean, I can add that to the.
Louis.
But I think if I understand correctly, the big impact the big benefit that we'll get if we do go all in on eventing is that we could remove some of the watches, right? So like we could refactor some of our controllers to just consume cloud events instead of. Is that true?
Well, let me be clear. That's not what this ADR proposes. It doesn't propose that Tecton, it doesn't propose that Konflux use any of the events that are generated, just that it generates them and emits them. I don't want to get into an argument about whether Konflux should be using eventing or not. That's a different discussion.
Okay. So what would be the benefit of enabling the emitting events? Is it just so we can use Cube Archive?
No, it's Cube Archive doesn't necessarily use cloud events. It uses API server source. But no, as a user, I could start to monitor pipelines and see when they finish, or I can essentially write any sort of tool I want to subscribe to events and then do something with that information. There's a lot of information that can be had from events.
Okay, so you could make it easier to extend the different pieces of Konflux.
I'm not even talking about doing it as Konflux. I'm talking about a team using Konflux that may want to automatically generate some reports based on pipeline run success or any of those types of things, or send mail to somebody, or Brian just said send a Slack message when a pipeline finishes. All the stuff that's really customizable to a particular team and may not make sense for Konflux itself to do.
Right. So easier to extend is what I meant. Which sounds like what these things are. Okay. But
I'm not proposing I'm not proposing that Konflux use the events to extend itself, right? I'm not saying the Konflux team should be using these events. Okay.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that we understand the reason why we would enable this, and being able to do those things that you say, like generate reports and whatnot. That makes sense to me.
Let me paste something. I'm preparing a paste. In the architecture overview doc, we've got this bullet that says use Tecton for anything that should be extended by the user, building, testing, releasing. And like, I think if we were to accept this ADR, like that would change, right? We're recommending a different thing or an additional thing. If the user wants to add Slack notifications or send an email, then they can either add that to their build pipeline, their test pipeline, or their release pipeline, or they can write something that's going to consume a cloud event to do that same or similar thing. That sound right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. This has been a I guess a thing that's been on my mind for a while, that I like that in Konflux we have this explicit flow of control. If you want to send a Slack notification or email or whatever, then currently you can extend your build pipeline or your test pipeline or your release pipeline to add those particular things. And if we're running up into like the limits of that pattern, I guess I'd like to know where they are, rather than add another way for users to integrate, just because it's another way for users to integrate. Like, do we have examples of users who can't do the kinds of extension that they need to do that cloud events would give them a different way of doing?
Well, to me, it's much more onerous if I want to send an email or maybe a one-off because I'm watching one particular thing, to have to go modify the production build and release pipeline to do it, right? When I can just subscribe to some events and then do it myself without touching anything in production. I don't have to touch anything to do this, right? Your proposal is, if I want to do that, okay, so I got to generate it. I got to go and figure out how to do it in the pipeline. Then I got to change the pipeline, which is in production, by the way, or potentially in production. And am I going to break production while I'm doing these changes? Or I have to test it on the staging environment, which may take me a couple weeks to get it set, and then I have to get it promoted to production.
But this is different. This is user customizable behavior. So like, you don't have to get it through the production, staging, and deployment flow of the Konflux system itself. But as a user in a tenant, you can extend your build pipelines to add a Slack notification or an email notification. You're providing your testing pipelines to the system, and so you can add Slack or email notifications to the end of that. Release is different. Like, if you're releasing through a managed namespace, that managed team would need to add a notification or something to the end of the pipeline, but it's still not something that has to go through like a promotion process for the deployment of the system itself. It's just bespoke to that release engineering or SRE space.
Yeah, to me, it's more work to update the pipeline, and I could break it in the process, whether it's in my workspace or not. I'd rather, once I have my pipelines building stuff, I don't really want to touch them anymore. I don't want to be editing them one week to add something to add mail, and the next week I need a report, so I got to go add another pipeline stage on to add, reporting. It seems like it's much more onerous on the user to get stuff working.
Yeah. Andrew, I'll put my hand back up.
Do users even have the appropriate permissions within their own tenants to be able to take advantage of the cloud events? Do you have to use a controller, or like, do they have the ability to create whatever is needed to react to them, to send the emails to their own tenant? Because I think right now, most of the customizations, we recommend that being driven by pipelines. You can create a pipeline as a user, you can run these pipelines, but if we want to assess cloud events for potential user expandability, not platform engineering expandability, we would need to make sure that appropriate permissions are in place within the user namespace.
Yep, that's all true.
Yeah, cool. Greg, did the conversation give you feedback to develop the ADR further? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I can add the stuff that Brian suggested about configuring the ADR, configuring, being able to turn on and off Tecton results. Emitting cloud events on Konflux. Yeah, but I mean, I don't know what else has changed based on discussion. I mean, it sounds like
I think if I
It's
could,
either yes or no.
if I could make requests, I think Andrew's request to describe how users would consume events in terms of RBAC in their namespace, that would be helpful to know like how a user would consume it. And then if we could add a section in there too about when a user would choose to use CloudEvents for some automation instead of extending their build, test, and release pipelines.
Yeah, I
Like-
think that part's in there already, but I can double check.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think there's ever a case where you couldn't extend your pipeline to do what you want to do with CloudEvents,
Yeah.
right? I'm not saying that there's things you can't extend your pipeline to do. I'm just saying it's easier with CloudEvents and it's much less invasive on what you already have in a working build environment.
Okay.
So yeah, I can do that.
Okay.
I'll make those changes.
I guess I'll just go on the record and say I'm not of the mind that I think we should just say a blanket no to this. I think we just want to like give it appropriate context, and
Yep.
the optional toggle that Brian's talking about it will be helpful.
Mhm.
Cool. Okay, I'll follow up offline about it, Greg. I've got
Okay.
questions that I don't quite know how to ask yet about how a user would use it, but we'll get there.
Okay. Thanks.
Of course. Let me check back on the agenda. Did a fourth point show up? No, that gets us to the end of our 3 points. Any other topics anyone wants to bring up before we close the call? Stop recording?
Did David show up back up with his microphone?
Good question.
I guess not.
Yeah, I did. So I mean, not very important. We can do this as a follow-up, but I think the UI team needs to be informed of this decision on Workspaces because that affects them. They will need to make some changes. I don't know if the UI team is represented here in this call, but I can take the lead and start working with them.
Definitely. Thank you, David. I don't think I see anybody from UI team on right now, but that's great.
Yeah, we could take that.
Cool. Thanks. Okay, thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop recording. Good conversation, good discussion today.